The 13th of May 2025 was a very special day for Formula 1 because it marked 75 years to the day that the first ever Formula 1 World Championship race took place at a disused airfield about 15 miles southwest of Northampton. And since then, Formula 1 has become a multi-billion pound industry for the UK economy. It was a race that I described as being fit for a king, and it's the only British Grand Prix that had a reigning British monarch attend. Royals have attended the races since, with the Princess of Wales along with William and Harry attending the 1994 British Grand Prix, and Diana herself handed the winner's trophy to Damon Hill, who had won that quite controversial race. I've done videos on both of those events as it so happens, doing the Race Fit for a King video just after Queen Elizabeth died. But as some of you might have already read in my Discord server or seen on my Twitter and Instagram, I was invited out to Silverstone on the 13th of May to be one of the first people to go and see some of the cool stuff that the Silverstone Museum has got for the 75th anniversary celebrations. And I was part of a small group who got to see everything before the general public did. So armed with a travel mug of Mrs Millward's strongest coffee and some Sam Fender on the stereo, I headed down the M6 and M1 to Silverstone. And I'm not just saying this because I was invited down there and got to see it for free and all that other influence stuff, but it's definitely something that you should go and see. It's on until September if you do want to go and see it, so you've got plenty of time to go if you want to. But it's something that you do need to go and see because everything they've got there is a snapshot from history, something that I quite enjoy and have been fortunate to make my living from, motorsport history. And speaking of motorsport history, I've got a sponsor here that also enjoys a bit of motorsport history. This video has been kindly sponsored by the good people over at REC Watches, a timepiece manufacturer based in Denmark that does things a little differently. REC Watches has been in the industry since 2014, and in that time they've produced watches infused with the DNA of some of the most iconic machines in history. Some of their special edition watches have been made out of parts of Steve McQueen's TR6, Carroll Shelby's prototype Mustang, John DeLorean's personal DMC-12, and an SR-71 Blackbird. Now though, they've come up with something incredible, a watch made from parts of the first ever Ford GT40, chassis P001. Available in blue, green and white, the various parts of the watch are made using repurposed parts of the original car, such as the tachymeter scales being made from the aluminium coolant pipes that were on that chassis. The parts that are repurposed are from salvage, excess or otherwise unusable parts. As REC say themselves, no cars were harmed in the making of these watches. Each of the three colours evokes images of the Ford GT40s that demolished the 24 Hours of Le Mans for 4 straight years, with the Shelby Blue example conjuring up images of not just the GT40, but the Shelby Mustangs, the Cobras, and other fast Fords of the 1960s. It's a very touching throwback to a time in motorsport that has since been immortalised in film. Given that they use parts of the original cars, these watches are quite limited, with 17 pre-orders still available at the time of writing and 723 pieces available in total. Pre-orders do come with a 20% discount with delivery available from January 2026. To learn more about REC watches, their history and the rest of their catalogue, including the other products that I mentioned earlier, you can find a link to their website down in the description. I would have filmed myself arriving at the museum and driving into the car park, but I couldn't because it's illegal. But when I got there, it was a case of signing in, getting my VIP wristband because VIP treatment, and then being led into this opening area, I'll call it. Now I did get some pictures and videos, but my DSLR camera is a bit old and, well, I have a major skill issue. So if the ones off my DSLR are naff, I do apologise. I actually went back through later on and got some shots with my iPhone, just to be sure. But the first bit you enter is this dark tunnel with a starting grid on the ground. And on the walls you get an audio and visual history of the things that have happened at Silverstone over the last 78 years. As it so happens, because you've got the years prior to the F1 World Championship. So it starts with Lewis Hamilton in the modern era, goes back into the 90s, then into the 80s with some motorcycle crews working on a bike, and then it goes further and further and further back to the first ever races at what was then the recently decommissioned RAF Silverstone. When it's all done, then it gets cool. It's like I said, you're coming through this one set of doors, but then at the far end, where the doors to the actual museum are, these 5 red lights came on, and then they went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, with Murray Walker counting down, and then Murray Walker shouts go, and then you're just bombarded with sights and sounds and everything else from Silverstone from the last 75 years. I would have filmed it, but I was using the camera that I'm using to talk to you now on, and it did the strobing thing, so yeah, that wasn't great. but it was cool to see, and it's definitely one of those things you have to see to properly experience. So moving on into the museum proper, after getting hyped up from the previous room, you get this wide open upstairs area showing how Silverstone went from a bomber base to a state-of-the-art facility and the home of British Motorsport that it is today. There's maps of the old circuit as was used in 1948 for the first race pre-World Championship, as well as some other stuff to show the circuit when it was an RAF base, since the 80th anniversary of VE Day has also just happened. This bit here was quite moving, a tribute to everybody who flew out of the old RAF Silverstone that never made it home, as well as another tribute to William Grover Williams, the first ever Monaco Grand Prix winner who was later a spy for the French resistance and later executed by the Germans. In addition to the RAF Bomber Command stuff, there were 2 interactive games that you can play. One was shooting down the Luftwaffe with a tail gun mounted to the Wellington bombers that flew out of the old airfield, hence Wellington Strait, and the other was using old school maths to drop propaganda leaflets behind enemy lines. Just beyond that, you get to see some of the little bits and pieces that were around for the first races held on the circuit, complete with the trophies and other bits and pieces that they handed out, along with the entry list for the first ever Grand Prix at Silverstone, which had some bloke on the grid called Chiron, and another called Reg Parnell who ended up running his own team later on. The car called an ERA you might not have heard of, but that's okay, because a little further up, you get to see it. This is an ERA from that time period, and you can sit in it and get your picture taken. I don't know much about the car other than the steering wheel was about the size of the wheels it was sat on, and that the cockpit was incredibly exposed. It makes you wonder how they survived anything in those things, because there are no seatbelts and the seat was just a piece of leather with some soft stuff inside. Put that next to a modern car and the difference between the two is night and day. Absolutely mad. And next to that is the first Cooper ever made. Cooper, much like March and Lotus, ended up supplying many customer teams with off-the-shelf cars ready to rock for any privateer entry or new team that wasn't building their own cars. Cooper was the first team to win with a rear engine car in Formula 1, with Jack Brabham winning his first 2 world titles in one. Bernie Ecclestone also had a crack at Grand Prix racing in one of these cars, and much like the ERA, it's almost unfathomable that they ran round racetracks like Spa and the Nürburgring in this thing. Health and safety really was an afterthought. But if it's other cars you want to take a look at, don't worry, they've got loads of them, and I'm going to show you them just after this section, but I will point out that when you go, there will be 3 cars there that weren't there when I went there. Those cars being Graham Hill's 1962 BRM, which he won the World Championship in, George Russell's 2024 Mercedes, and a Ferrari Sharknose. Although it's going to be a replica of a Sharknose because, well, they destroyed them, didn't they? So it'll be a replica, but still, a Ferrari Sharknose. That's cool. And when you go down the stairs to get from the first floor down to the ground floor, you're face to face with this absolute beauty. The only Formula 1 car to win a championship where the driver and constructor are the same bloke. And thanks to my VIP pass, I was able to cross over the rope and have a closer look at the inside of the car, with the tiny little gear shifter on the right hand side, and get very up close and personal with the Repco V8 that powered the Brabham. And what you don't realise about these cars is that they're even lower down than you think, and I've used archive photos of this car loads of times in the past. But it was actually longer than I was expecting. I don't know if it was to do with aspect ratios or resolutions, but it was quite a long car, weirdly. Denny Hume's Formula 2 Brabham was sat just behind it, so they've got these 2 examples. But if you think that's cool, then things are about to get more and more insane as you go through. Also, that Brabham is insured for a cool £2 million. And you know something, I'm actually somewhat of a Brabham driver myself. As weird as that sounds, driving for the esports side of things. But you walk around the corner and they've got a Lotus 72. An actual Lotus 72. I've said that this car was probably the most important F1 car because it was the first modern F1 car. In a way. It was the first to have the radiators mounted on the sides of the car, starting the side pods that we have on every open-wheeler since. And it's also the car that Emerson Fittipaldi won the 1972 Formula 1 World Championship in. Yes, it does have Ronnie Peterson's name on the side for some reason, but it's an honest-to-God real example of a John Player Special Lotus with the Ford DFV in the back. And don't get too irked if you can't get a good look, because round the side is an actual DFV. It should be illegal to have something that hardcore just on display, and was in service from 1967 all the way up to the mid-80s, which is an incredible shelf life, and I would say it's the greatest F1 engine of all time. Graham Hill, Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, James Hunt, Jochen Rindt, Emerson Fittipaldi and others all won races with one. It's been quite hard to balance everything for this video because if you live outside of the UK, chances are you're not going to be able to get over here to have a look. But if you do live in the UK, I don't want to show you everything because then it would be kind of pointless you going to have a look yourself, if you know what I mean. But around that area where the DFE is was also a 2016 spec Mercedes hybrid engine, as well as a couple of gearboxes. The size of the DFE compared to that hybrid is insane, considering that the hybrid engine in terms of the capacity of the internal combustion engine is much smaller, 1.6 versus 3 litres, and it's something that you don't truly understand until you see them next to each other. Where's the V10s, I hear you ask? They've got one lifted from Mika Häkkinen's McLaren just as you go in. And here it is. I told you my camera wasn't great, but at the same time I do have a major skill issue. But the thing is, I don't go out often enough to these kinds of things to justify getting a newer one. But what I also liked about the exhibition is the hidden gems that are tucked away, like this Formula 3 car that was driven by Johnny Herbert. And much like the other cars, you wonder how low they actually sat in these things, and still do. Because looking at how low this particular car is, Johnny must have been sat on the tarmac. And Johnny's not exactly tall either. And then I found my happy corner, because in this particular corner were some Formula 1 cars that I grew up idolising, and they just sat out in the open for anybody to have a look at. And to the museum's credit, the ropes that separate you from the cars are actually very close to the cars, so you can get incredibly close to them and see all the details. Just like this McLaren MP415, the car that David Coulthard won the 2000 British Grand Prix in. It's also Mrs. Millward's favourite Formula 1 car, and it looks just as not safe for work in person as it did on television. And what struck me is how much greyer the West livery is in person compared to how I remember it being on the telly. I always assumed that it was black, but there's definitely grey in there. And like I mentioned, and as you can see from the video footage here, the ropes that surround the exhibits are for the most part very close. So if you're tall enough and your arms reach out far enough, you can get some great camera shots and see into the cockpits of the cars. Close enough to see the rather weird steering wheel that McLaren used back then. But behind that Coulthard McLaren is a slightly smaller exhibit that, okay, maybe doesn't fit in with the whole 75th anniversary stuff, but is, at the same time, impressive. It's the Jota exhibit that they've got, showcasing a couple of prototypes, including the metallic green LMP2 that they ran in the 2020 season, was it? I think it might have been 2020, but as you're about to see in this little walk around of the 2020 LMP2, there's a signpost telling you about a Porsche of some description. This Porsche, driven by Callum Ilott, Norman Nato and Will Stevens in the 2024 World Endurance Championship. She's actually bigger than you think, and that diffuser at the back was massive. But the door was left open so you can have a little peek inside and see everything that's going on, although that steering wheel isn't the original one that they would have used. But to see a hypercar up close is something I wasn't expecting to see at this exhibition, but I'm glad I did, because the 963 is probably my current favourite racing car. But after a quick detour to see some prototypes, which kind of took my attention away from the Formula 1 cars, were two cars that had to be seen to be believed. Red 5. Nigel Mansell's 1992 World Championship winning car, nestled in between Jenson Button's Brawn and Daniel Ricciardo's 2014 Red Bull. But really, it's the Williams that draws the attention. Look at how exposed those cockpit sides are, and how low slung it is as well, given that the plank and the effective force ride heights were still a year and a half away by the time this car hit the track. As you can imagine, this car turned a lot of heads, and it has the telltale bulges where the upper suspension arms enter the car, which is how you know that it's one of the active suspension cars. Although it does have a massive sticker that confirms that it's an active suspension car. It was also pretty wide, and wider than I was anticipating, and I do apologise if the shots I use of this car are a bit naff, but again, it gives you more of an incentive to go and have a look yourself, if you can or want to. But like with the Coulthard McLaren, it was possible to get all around the car from the front to the back and get some good shots. But since we're here, we might as well look at Jenson's 2009 winning Brawn. Like an idiot, I didn't get a video walk around of this car, but it was still beautiful. And yes, it's got the diffuser on the back, which you can get really close to and have a good look and take some pictures. I think it was the first thing a lot of people went to look for when they got there, just trying to figure out how this diffuser looked and worked. And I still don't understand how it worked, and I've done a video on that car. But the last F1 car on the way out though is something I've wanted to see up close since I was 5 years old. Damon Hill's 1996 Williams, probably my favourite Formula 1 car of all time. And what you don't realise about this car is how much that Rothmans blue pops out at you. It's not just blue, it's a deep, and I mean deep, blue. And it also must have been the 4:3 aspect ratio we had back in the 90s that made this car look shorter than it actually was. And again, longer and lower than I ever anticipated. And yes, I was there for a long time, just staring at it. And the assistants there were kind enough to let me have my picture taken with it. I've got many favourite Formula 1 cars like the Lotus 49, the BT20, the MP413, but I will always have a special something for this particular car. It might be because it's one of my early F1 memories. It's probably as close as I'll get to driving it as well. And for some of you watching, you might be thinking, oh, he has got legs. So James, if you're watching, I've got 0 points on my licence and I've never been pulled over by the cops in the 18 years that I've been on the road. Well, that's got to count for something, right? But I'll put up some of the other videos and pictures over this little talky bit because, well, the video would just be unnecessarily long with me going, there was this, and this, and this, and this, and this, like a kid in year 4 telling us what he got up to on his holidays. But there was enough there for me to have something in the region of about 3.5 hours there, and I didn't even look at everything. There's a great video presentation by Jackie Stewart standing in a recreation of a medical tent from the 60s and talking about how he helped to get the safety standards upgraded and how motorsport became safer over the years. There's bits and pieces about aerodynamics, suspension, tyres and lots of memorabilia dotted around. Helmets, trophies, suits, and a go-kart that was driven by some kid from Stevenage back in the early 90s. Whatever happened to him? Actually, speaking of safety, there's this. David Purley's car, or what was left of it, after he crashed at Silverstone where he became, at the time, the human who suffered the most G-forces and survived. That is until Kenny Brack came along. That is what is left of the tub when they fished him out of the tyre wall. Considering the safety standards of the time, it's a miracle he survived to tell the tale. And there were some motorbikes. Anyway, there is actually too much to go into a lot of detail about. They even recreated the old clubhouse from the old days, and they've got the actual letter that Enzo Ferrari wrote to the organisers of the first F1 race where he complained about the starting money, which has been translated from Italian into English. I've also got a good picture of the sign-in sheet from the, I think it's 1992 British Grand Prix that's signed by Senna, the Michael, Damon, Nigel, and others. I'll try and figure out a way of putting all these up as a giant photo album. I might put them on Discord and then create a channel where you can talk about them and analyse the different pictures that I have taken. There was so much there to see, and like I said, I didn't look at everything that was there, and it was an absolutely wonderful experience to be able to sit down and just stare at the cars from your childhood, along with at least 4 cars that I've covered on the channel at some point. The Brabham, the Lotus, the Brawn, and the 14C. An FW18 one in the future? Well, at least I won't have to buy any pictures because, yeah, I admit that's the car I took the most pictures of. If you love F1 history and motorsport history and also want a good day out, then I highly recommend going. And I'm not just saying this because I got to go for free and I was invited. Like, I genuinely, and I mean genuinely, enjoyed the time there, and I hope that you've enjoyed looking at some of the pictures and videos that I've put up. It was kind of disappointing to not be able to see Russell's Mercedes, not because, you know, George Russell fan, but at the same time, a modern Formula 1 car that I could have got up close and personal with, taken loads and loads and loads of pictures, and then used them for the current affairs stuff, pressing issue stuff, humour the rumour stuff, whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, that does mean I can make another trip down there at some point. And the Sharknose Ferrari, I definitely want to see that because, well, Sharknose Ferrari. But like I say, I'll put them up on Discord or something, create another channel so you can talk about them, and so on and so on and so on. But if you do want to go and have a look, you've got until September, so you've got loads of time if you do want to go. So then, some pictures, videos and other bits and pieces from my trip to the Silverstone Museum this week to see the 75th anniversary collection. Massive thank you to the Silverstone Museum for the invite, and it was a great experience all round to be surrounded by so much history. If you did enjoy this video, then do give it one of those thumb up things so I know I did a good job, and for more stuff from the channel, get subscribed and also get the bell on so you never miss out on anything else to do around here. Massive thanks as ever go out to the fine bunch of lads who keep the channel running via Patreon, and if you want to help keep the lights on around here or help contribute to the picture purchasing piggy bank, then there is a link to Patreon down in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Or there's super thanks if you just want to do a one and done donation and top up my coffee cup, and there's also memberships there if you want to do Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.